I wanted to talk to Buck Sexton about a few of these things. First of all, Buck, I can't figure out what your motivation, how schizophrenic do you look to be backing Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria, the ally of Iran, and they are the sworn enemy of Iran, the Muslim Brotherhood, Sunni and Shia, and then going over and making nicey nice with the Iranians. What? I can't even figure that out.
Well, you know, in the Syrian context, if we were doing much to help the rebels, which I think is not really the case because the administration doesn't want to do enough that it would be obvious that we're helping them, right? If they're helping, they're doing it in such a way that there's a degree of plausible deniability. Those rebels, the Al-Qaeda guys, are the enemies in this specific context of Iranian interests through Hezbollah and Assad in Syria. That does not mean that they are enemies in the broad spectrum scheme of things when it comes to the West and Israel. They're not willing to work together. We know Iran will arm, train, and work alongside Sunni groups. They're supposed to hate each other so much. Glenn, we always have to remember, they hate us more.
I know they do. Okay, so the next thing is, when I met with Benjamin Netanyahu in 2000, I think it was 6, I said, we're not going to solve this nuclear thing, and we're not going to do it. And there's going to come a time when there's going to be a peace meeting with Iran, and we'll make overtures to Iran, and the world will say, oh my gosh, we're on the verge of peace. And Israel will strike, because they'll have to strike. They can't have nuclear weapons, and Saudi Arabia will want those gone as well. But then the world will say, it's those damn Jews that did it again.
Well, the opening right now is a fake opening, so let's just start with that. And it is exactly what you said. They've allowed, or with Ahmadinejad as the president, and again, this is very important, the president is essentially a puppet. He's a figurehead. He's not really in charge in this country. Anybody who's done any
Grand Mufti or whoever the
basic study, the supreme leader,
that's right,
Khamenei, he is, and there's even below him the Guardian Council. The Guardian Council is a bunch of guys who decide who's allowed to run, and they cut out hundreds and hundreds of, in the last election, people from even being candidates. So the
this sounds like the Fed. But I digress.
But so you have two sort of power structures happening. One ties in the Guardian Council, the supreme leader, the mullahs, and on the other you have this sort of pseudo-democracy. And oh, by the way, there's also the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the military, the sort of the guarantors and protectors of the revolution. They're very powerful. They're very prominent. So just having Rouhani say, yeah, I'll talk to you guys, really doesn't mean anything. I mean, the Iranian state can't go back on this program at this point in time. The Iranian people, maybe, although, by the way, they've tended to be very favorably disposed towards a nuclear program. But if the leadership, the real leadership, not Rouhani, if the guys who are calling the shots at this point said, you know what, you're right, we're going to give in, we're going to negotiate this stuff away, Iran is in a fragile place right now. They have essentially invested the nationalistic hopes of this country into this program. You think they're going to give that away? No. Ahmadinejad allowed them to push as far as they could, and now it's a little tight, it's a little uncomfortable, so now they try to...
What are we doing?
This ends with Iran having a nuclear bomb. That's my honest assessment. This ends with Iran actually getting the capability.
Then what happens?
Wow, I thought I was going far enough out on a limb there. Then I honestly don't know.
Come on. I mean, that, at least for me, that's not surprising. I thought we were there in 2006. We were headed there.
We get into the Middle East becomes a nuclear chessboard as opposed to an energy chessboard. Yeah. The Saudis, the Sunnis, they will want to have a deterrent weapon there because, look, especially with this administration, do you trust that they're going to come riding in as a cavalry to catch your back? Does Israel? Does anybody? I don't know.
No.
I wouldn't think so.
No. Okay, so does what's his name, the Supreme Leader? Khomeini, the Supreme Leader is his title. Does the Supreme Leader believe in the 12th Imam? Does he believe to usher in hasten the return of the Promised One?
Well, this brings us into, there were all of these rumors, and they weren't just sort of rumors out there in the blogosphere. People within the Iranian government would speak outside unnamed sources and say that Ahmadinejad was a Hojataya, which is this anti-Baha'i sect that is a hardline 12th Imam, bring about the end of the world. Some people say they want to bring about the end of the world by peaceful means. You can believe that if you want. But the reality is that these people think that by hastening the end times, they'll bring forward the Mahdi. Is the Supreme... The truth is nobody really knows. But if you're crazy enough to support terrorist groups going back for decades, if you're crazy enough that you think that the world will believe you when you live on a sea of oil and all you want is nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, when there are even better energy sources coming online all the time that aren't nuclear, you're crazy enough to believe a whole lot of things. And the notion that this administration is wily or wise enough to be the counterparty to these guys, and at the end of this, not look really foolish. I don't think anybody really buys that at this point.
We've destroyed ourselves as a world superpower, haven't we? We're a joke now, aren't we?
I mean, we still have the biggest, baddest military on the planet. We still have the biggest economy on the planet, but we have a leadership that is not wielding this properly. And in the meantime, I think it gives a lot of bad actors many ideas as to how they can start to hem us in, start to really legitimately weaken us. Now it's just a question of if we had competent people in charge, they could start to maybe make some of the gains that have been lost. But in time, if this continues on, China, Russia, other opposition forces, if you will, around the world will see this and they'll say, now's a good time to start pushing. Now's a good time to start hurting U.S. interests in a way that is permanent, that's not reversible based on an election cycle.
Buck Sexton, thanks very much. Buck will be on the Real News coming up in just a little while, and if you haven't heard his radio show yet, you can hear it on the Blaze Radio, blaze.com/radio. It's Saturdays.
Saturdays, 12 to 3 Eastern.
Really good. A emerging radio star, I believe.